Rain tapped against the window of the one-bedroom apartment where Isabella sat curled on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. The silence of the room wasn't real. It was filled with whispers that weren't hers, voices that echoed in her head, tugging at her sanity like invisible hands in the dark. "You're nothing. They're watching you. No one cares." The words twisted around her ribs like barbed wire. She had tried to work, barista, retail, even housekeeping, but the voices always followed her. Sometimes they screamed while she smiled at customers. Other times, she saw shadows move where there were none. Eventually, she stopped showing up. Eventually, the job stopped calling. Friends? Gone. Family? Distant and exhausted. She was alone. On the worst nights, she wondered if she was even alive or trapped in a waking nightmare that had no end. One cold morning, while wandering the city with a plastic bag full of her belongings and no clear destination, she stumbled into a small community center. It was warm, quiet. No one stared when she muttered to herself. A volunteer named Janine smiled and handed her a cup of tea without asking questions. "Do you want to paint?" she asked. Isabella blinked. "I don't know how." Janine shrugged. "Doesn't matter." The brush felt strange in her hand, but as she moved it over the canvas, something shifted. The noise in her head didn't go away, but it dulled. She painted the fear, the monsters, the shadows. Then she painted a beam of light cutting through them. She came back the next day, and the next. Some days she cried the whole time. Some days she laughed out loud at jokes only she understood, but she kept painting. Eventually, Janine connected her with a therapist who didn't treat her like she was broken. Through therapy, medication, and art, Isabella found her footing. Not perfectly, not all at once, but piece by piece. She began selling her paintings. People saw beauty in what she once thought was madness. One buyer even said, "This looks like hope surviving the storm." Years later, Isabella stood in a gallery filled with her work, surrounded by strangers who now called her artist. The voices were still there, but she had learned to talk back to them. In an interview she shared, "I used to think I was cursed, that my mind was my enemy. But now I know, sometimes the mind doesn't need to be silenced. It just needs to be heard differently. And even in the darkest places, a small spark can still light the way." She smiled at the camera. "I am that spark, and so are you.